2, 3, 4.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Power of Music Thinking. My name is Christoph Zürn, and this is the podcast for people with a musical heart and a wicked job. We're looking for stories, insights and tools from the big world of music to inspire leaders and followers to listen, tune, play, and perform in whatever field you're operating.
Our guest today is Dr. Maya Ackerman, a world-renowned AI expert who has been at the forefront of generative AI since 2015. She holds a PhD in computer science, is a professor at Santa Clara University, and has authored over 60 research publications. And as the co-founder and CEO of WaveAI, one of the earliest generative AI startups, she specializes in creating systems that elevate AI from a novelty to an essential tool for millions. A recognized woman of influence and sought after for her expertise by outlets like NBC News and New Scientists, her perspective is truly unique. In our conversation, we explore the delicate balance between human and machine creativity. It's a relationship that requires trust, improvisation, and a deep understanding of what you could truly call the dance of leading and following, like we do in music thinking. And that perspective is exactly what we explore today. This is a conversation that bridges worlds, from learning to play the piano and sing opera to becoming a CEO in AI. We get into the very nature of creativity itself, discussing improvisation, hallucination, imagination, and what Maya refers to as computational creativity. We even touch on science fiction, asking how these creative machines might elevate and not replace us in the near future. Okay, let's dive into it. Hello, Maya. Hello, welcome to the Power of Music Thinking.
Thanks so much for having me.
I always start with the same question. What was your first sonic experience or album or live performance that had an impact on you?
Actually, when I was a very young child, my mother used to play classical music a lot. And so actually, some of my earliest memories is just sort of playing as a very small child. My memories start around age 3. And it was just these beautiful, magnificent orchestras all day long being played on, I believe, a record player back in the 80s.
Nice. Do you recall what kind of music? You said classical music. Can you be a bit more specific? Okay, as a 3-year-old, maybe not, but maybe in hindsight?
In hindsight, I believe it must have been a lot of Mozart and Chopin. My mom loved Chopin. And I remember when I learned to play piano as a slightly older little girl, I remember the music of Chopin really, really spoke to me. And I think it's because I listened to him a lot when I was even smaller.
Right. Oh, by the way, in one of the episodes, I think it was Mike, I asked the same question to Mike, and he said that he once came home from school and told his mother, I have heard the most beautiful music in the world. And then he told her, I think, if I get it right, it was a piano concerto from Chopin, because he just named it. And then she told him that when she was pregnant with him, that she always was listening to it. So just to make the link with that one here. But your mother, did she play piano? Because I see a piano in your background.
I think my mother always wanted to learn an instrument, but we're talking here about a baby boomer right out of World War II in Soviet Russia. So she never had the opportunity. But actually, it's kind of an interesting story. When we left Russia, when I was 7 years old, right on my 7th birthday, the ruble was worthless, obviously, right? And so my grandfather bought a few really large items, including an upright grand, which ended up in my apartment, in part just to kind of like get some money out, not entirely focusing on exactly what we're going to use the piano for. And that's when my mother decided to try to find me a teacher. And so I started learning piano around 7 years old because of these sort of odd circumstances.
And by the way, where in Russia was it?
It was, well, technically it's not Russia anymore. This was back in USSR days. It's Belarus.
And now you're calling from?
Now this is Los Gatos, California. I've had quite a ride. I lived across 3 continents by the age of 12. I don't recommend it. It's weird to see the world from so many different perspectives so quickly.
How old were you when you moved?
So I moved to Israel when I was 7 years old, and then to Canada when I was 12, and I moved when I was 29 years old to the US.
So I can imagine that sound-wise, there are also completely different soundscapes. The sound in Russia, I assume, was maybe totally different, or is it just the city and every city is the same?
It's such an interesting point. Israel has a lot of folk music. At least when I lived there was a kind of a really big part of community is singing together. In some ways, and I don't want to stretch the analogy, but in some ways a little bit akin to how we understand the native communities here. So there's a little bit of this, like, we're still all making music together, and at the same time you have recorded music and kind of a lot of strong Western influence. And a lot of Jewish composers. So it really, sonically, I mean, it's a completely different landscape from anything else I've experienced. Russia, maybe because I was so young, most of my experiences were around classical music. But there was sort of communism was a whole religion, right? So there were some songs around that as well, that I kind of vaguely remember. Everything has music appended to it, whether we like the thing or not. And in Canada, that became really strong Western influence. So, I remember a lot of pop when I was sort of a young person that sort of dominated my soundscape. And I also really, really remember the national anthem, "O Canada," every single morning. And I found it so shocking that the anthem was played every single day. Because in Israel, it was something that was more like on special occasions, right? So that really stood out to me a lot, and something I've actually never had a chance to talk about. And here, because I didn't go to school here, that was not a factor in the U.S.
Maya, will you tell us a little bit more about yourself so that the listener gets an idea, also independent from that first musical story?
Oh, okay. Something. In addition to the fact that I lived across 3 continents by age 12 and had all kind of opinions about the songs I was hearing. I'm a musician at heart. I think I'm an artist. I think, like, not ideal, but in some world where I could just do whatever I wanted, I would just make music and art and more or less nothing else. But when we moved to Canada, we actually, my parents couldn't afford an instrument. And so music was sort of ripped out of my life. And I ended up towards the end of high school deciding that I wanted to focus on computer science, and found joy in the predictability and the sort of more regular rhythm and a different kind of challenge in studying math and computer science, and actually did that for 10 years at the University of Waterloo, culminating in a PhD in machine learning, while in parallel learning how to sing opera from a local opera singer. And that's sort of the background of my life. And that ultimately led me to discovering computational creativity, which is another word for generative AI, back in 2015, so 10 years before it became popular. In 2017, I opened one of the earliest generative AI startup called WaveAI that we continue to run till this day, which helps musicians make music, but really just helps musicians make music. It doesn't secretly make music instead of them, which drives me nuts when these concepts get intermixed. But yeah, that's more or less me. And lately I've just been, I wrote a book. I've been giving a lot of talks. It's been a ride. I'm just in my 40s. I feel like I've lived a couple of careers.
That's quite a lot. But let's dive into it. And opera singer, do you still sing operas or classical music?
Since we started running Wave AI, I honestly have not had the time to perform as much, but I miss it, and it's time to do a little more again. I at least plan to record an album that I've composed over the past couple of years.
Okay, and did you compose then with AI?
I always use AI when I need to, when I'm stuck, when I need the extra help. And yeah, that album included, I think maybe there's one song that barely uses any AI. But almost every time, at least for lyrics, I like to use Lyric Studio. Even if the chorus just comes to me fully baked and the bridge comes out of my heart, there's always a verse that needs a little bit of inspiration. And sometimes I use AI heavily. It kind of varies. And then I forget. I look back and how much they use AI for this? I don't know anymore.
Yeah, when AI is, let's say, just a tool, it's also like when you compose, you might not know, was it on the piano, on the keyboard, or did I use a DAW, digital workstation, or what instruments? But that sounds cool because the combination of AI and classical music we don't hear so often. Most of the time it's like, yeah, more like some kind of pop music that also very critically now is flooding Spotify or other platforms where you sometimes think, oh my God, is there still a human involved or not? And there's the other side, that AI is a tool. So tell us everything about Wave AI. How did you start?
So with Wave, it came out of my own struggles with songwriting. And the part that I found hardest to begin with was coming up with vocal melodies. So something like, I miss performing opera becomes, I miss performing opera, right? That's like one way to sing it. Or I miss performing opera, right? That's another way to sing the same thing. And it's a whole universe of how we can sing the same tiny little phrase. But in my mind, trained, if you will, on very specific music when I was young, I kept coming up with the same stuff, which in retrospect was kind of like folk music that I heard a lot as a little girl. But I was trying to write pop or like something more modern, really just something different, and I couldn't for the life of me. And so when I discovered computational creativity, the first thing that David Locher and I built, and he will become one of my co-founders later in the story, was a system where you'd give it a little bit of lyrics about a sentence, and it would come up with many, many different ways that you could sing them to come up with a vocal melody for them. And I remember like this command line thing, I just printed a whole bunch of these melodies in this horrible notation that we invented just to get it done as quickly as possible. And I'd sit at my piano interpreting that notation. And I'm like, wow, I can write now. I was so excited. I just felt like I could see so many more possibilities. It was such an amazing moment. No interface, super rough, like such an unbelievably minimalistic version of the system we ended up building, and it made such a difference for me. So it still took us 3 years to open the company. So we released that technology. We knew nothing about running a business. It's amazing how little one can know about something. And we made like every mistake in the book. We would like build everything without talking to a single user, or we would like release something after working on it for 8 months and not advertise it at all. We would make these like horrendous rookie mistakes because we were like researchers and engineers, right? And then we started learning, and then we started the learnings came, and we started trusting ourselves more. Sometimes the advice you get is not the best advice because sometimes incentives are not aligned. And in 2020, after a horribly disappointing loss of a large B2B deal, we finally came out with Lyric Studio, which extracted just the lyrics making out of the system. And we knew how to promote it, and people loved it, and the thing just grew and grew and grew, and it was just one of the most fascinating, almost surreal experiences of my life when the company actually started, it started gaining some real traction.
So you're talking about Lyrics Studio, right?
Lyric Studio is our bread and butter, yeah.
Is it a part of Wave AI? How do they relate? And
So
by the
Wave
way, I will
is
put all the links in the show notes so that people, when they listen, they don't have to search.
Oh, awesome. Appreciate it. So the company is called WaveAI, and we have two products, Lyric Studio and Melody Studio.
First, I have to tell you, I'm a teacher, lecturer at the University of Applied Science in Utrecht. And at the moment, I'm also teaching a course, The Power of Sound, and where students have to understand what sound can do for brands, for organizations. How does a sound? How does a brand sound? Because most of the time we know how does a brand look, and they are allowed to use AI to come up with 30 seconds of a brand anthem. They have the possibility to either compose by themselves, to make, let's say, a mood board out of different songs and with the different sounds, or they can use AI. And there are many AI platforms that they can use. And I didn't come along about Melody Studio and Lyric Studio, so this will go on the list definitely the next time.
Wow. First of all, what a fascinating project to do with your students. And I love that we're back to anthems, which is sort of how we opened today. So that's incredible. I think society still underestimates how much power sound has. It's almost subconscious for some people. Yes. That's incredible. So, yeah, in today's world, we have incredible systems like Suno and Udio, which can just create sound for you, which, you know, from a technological standpoint, I think is marvelous. Now, my tools are coming in with a completely different purpose, right? The purpose of my tools is to help people compose vocal music and to help people compose it, not to give people compositions of vocal music, which is a big difference. I'm happiest when my users become better pen and paper composers, right? I want this growth to be internalized. I'm not trying to foster dependence on my products in a sense that suddenly the writer feels incompetent without my tools around. And that's what happens when somebody opens up creative possibilities for you, shows you more options for lyrics in short form, more options for melodies. Your mind gets trained to see more possibilities, and then you're able to see them by yourself. That being said, a lot of people stick with our tools precisely because they keep being helpful at different stages of their development. As just like another person can help support your creative growth, like you work with them and you find them really inspiring and you feel that you're getting smarter because of it, but it doesn't mean you stop working with them. You don't have to keep working with them. You have a choice. And I think that's sort of a new perspective in business that we're missing. There's a little bit too much dependence fostering, too much addiction building in lots of different products. And I really feel that that's not suitable when it comes to music creation, because it's a soulful experience. So again, that's different in a couple of ways from some of the really hyper popular recent tools that we're seeing today. And in terms of how we make money, it's really simple and transparent, although it took us a while to get there. Whatever you make, whatever music you make, we don't touch it. That's simply put not our business, what you do with it afterwards. We charge a small amount for using the system, right? So it's a very limited freemium. You get to kind of taste the product for free, but after that, it's very, very small amounts of money to just keep a subscription going. And I think ultimately, I feel that that's a more ethical way to do it, but perhaps most importantly, that's how our users prefer it. Once you start taking pieces of their music, it just gets really confusing. They don't know what they're allowed to do with it. The dream of making something really famous, then they're like not sure how that best case outcome is going to play out if an AI company can suddenly come in and be like, well, it's actually mine, right? So we just don't touch it at all. It's completely royalty free. And also because it really, in reality, we help you with your creative process. That's our goal. I don't think it's entirely appropriate for a tool like ours to even try to contend something about the creative product that results from this very varied process.
Absolutely. And that's completely different. So I really love to hear this because, talking about AI and being in a university, it's like everybody's using it, full stop. So, and everybody tries to make a shortcut. And my concern from a creative business point of view, which is the bachelor program, is like, how can you ever stay creative if you just always take shortcuts? So maybe you're the best shortcut taker, okay, maybe, but you don't need so many. And I really wonder how when you have an ideation, starting generating ideas, coming up with something new, and you start with AI, I think you're limiting yourself of all the serendipity, of all the fun of creation, but also of the power of creation. And that's completely different to what you just named Suno or Udio. And Suno was the one that I mentioned. There's somewhere in all the long little words, and there it's hidden that they at the very end they also want to earn an extra, although you have a paid version. That as ethical aspect. We hear it a lot. Many people talk about, let's talk about first ethics in AI, and then we can use it. But it sounds like there is more. So why did you do it that way, and maybe not another way?
We've experimented with different models. I don't think we ever were going to take royalties from our users, but we did play around with kind of longer freemiums. It was actually kind of hard for us to charge in the beginning. Again, not coming from the business world. You build something, even something really good, and it kind of feels funny to charge people money at first. I don't know, just being honest. But then we kind of realized that it's better to charge, an appropriate amount without a very big freemium, right? So some tools you can keep using forever to some degree, but then there are kind of hidden ways that they're making money on you. And we thought it was actually more ethical to be more transparent about it. It's like, no, my company needs to make money, so we have to charge. We don't have to charge a lot, but there's a small amount that we have to charge. And we have to charge it almost from the beginning after a really short trial. And that removes the need for these weird behind the scenes, like any kind of non-transparency. You lose trust with your users. And that's the last thing you want to do. And even as a user myself, I'm a musician, I make music. I don't want to have any confusion on whether I own the music or not. You introduce that, you're really messing things up. Unless, of course, you're targeting complete non-musicians, people who have no interest in creating, who want to press two buttons, and then you're operating in another universe then. That's not the same thing, right? And some of the products we're seeing right now, and I don't want to name any names, are still finding their target market, right? And sometimes what the investors want and what the entrepreneurs want and what the users want are three completely different things that are not easily bridged. So that's why you're seeing... You get this mixed message and you get this confused experience because the people serving it to you haven't quite figured it out yet. Right? Even if there are things about the product that are just incredible and phenomenal, right? But if you're serving musicians, if that's your goal, if your target market is to help people who want to make music, you shouldn't be taking any rights to the music. Do DAWs take any rights to the music? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. You said something else really, really interesting there in your previous comment around shortcuts. I really wanted to comment on that because I was just teaching as well. Over the past 22 weeks I've been teaching.
Hey, congratulations. Welcome.
I was on a long sabbatical and then I was teaching for a bit, 2 quarters. And there are different things you see. Of course, you see shortcuts, right? You see over-reliance on AI, which is very upsetting sometimes. But you also see people using AI in fascinating ways. I gave a project to my students to do an art project together with AI. So it was open, like use AI, do an art project. And some of them gave so much of themselves to the process. It was unbelievable. They did hand drawings. They worked hard to modify what the AI gave. They would do pieces with the AI and pieces themselves. So some people really take the invitation to use it as a real collaborator and to amplify themselves, right? Maybe that's because they're trying to create something that's better than they can create alone, and they still believe in their own capabilities. Whereas at other times, our students just want to get it done as quickly as possible and to move on to the next thing. And then you're seeing that shortcut and what can sometimes feel like cheating to us, right? So it's really like almost opposite behaviors depending on who and when does it.
Right, absolutely. I like that. I like that very much. Because exactly what you say, sometimes students, they just want to get it done and they use the shortcut and they're happy with what they get because they have no expectation. They just throw something out in the world, and hey, you get something back, and not even in 10 seconds. But I like very much that part of that using AI literally as a tool. We hear it often, but what you just described, that's like the difference between technology and a technique. You use a technique, a certain way how to do something. Like let's say a craftsman is using a plane. You know how it works, and at a certain moment you understand. Hey, if I do it in a different way, or I get a new kind of plane, I can do something completely different with it. So that's more technique. You learn something, so it also changes you in the way how you work in your craft. And that compared to technology, which there is a button, there is a field where you can get information and click, and then you get something back. And that's also most of the time the end of the story. Maybe you'd say, okay, now give me something, make it smaller, make it bigger, make it more, make it whatever. But it's dancing around what already was there. But if you use it as a technique, you really could maybe at a certain moment you stop with AI, and later you bring it in again, just maybe to change the surface or something.
Wow. Yeah, I like that. The perspective of technique is really powerful. It's a very familiar metaphor, right, that people can lean into. I wanted to also point out how I was writing an article recently, and I was trying to make it as best as it possibly can be. And I realized that with ChatGPT, I can get many different variants on how a paragraph can be presented and how a sentence can be presented. And then I realized 3 hours in that I have been messing so much with different ways to phrase every single sentence that I may well never stop the exercise. Like, the space of creative possibilities became too large. And I realized, like, really, every single sentence, there are so many ways to do it. And I was curious to find the best one. And at some point, I'm like, wow, this is crazy. This is taking me too long. It's taking me way longer than if I didn't have ChatGPT. So it's really about how you use it. Like, it doesn't have to be a shortcut. It can be a path to something that's much better than you can do by yourself because you're engaging with it so heavily. And it can be a complete trap that you never, ever, ever finish what you're doing because you keep trying to optimize it, which is very unusual, but it happened to me once.
I also think about, like, if you use it, in what way are you using it? For example, talking about generative music, which is also quite old. For example, Brian Eno, he always makes that comparison with a gardener. So, like, you plant something, then you give it water, and then you see how it develops and it changes, compared to, let's say, like a magician, and then there's a whole building standing there. And that's a little bit the comparison we just had. So one uses time and also the nature of natural development. And the other thing is like a magical black box that appears and maybe also disappears in some way from one moment to the other.
I think what you're talking about here is kind of the myth that we believe, right? So this idea, I like to call it the all-knowing oracle. This idea of a machine being an all-knowing oracle where you just ask it something and it just gives you the answer, or you just tell it something and it gives you a whole building, is something that science fiction has been feeding for decades.
Right.
But it's a completely flawed vision. This is not what technology is most of the time. It's a wrong goalpost. It's very, very misguiding. It's disempowering. It fosters addiction. And it's the whole idea that the machine knows better than us is absurd. Other than looking up facts in a context where facts are appropriate, for which you don't even need AI, you just need a lookup table. Other than that limited context, the whole idea of an all-knowing oracle is absurd. And we need to start moving away from that vision and thinking about machines in a lot more of kind of, I think moving away from the all-knowing oracle, we can actually respect technology for what it actually is. Accept the fact that it's flawed. Accept the fact that, like us, it makes mistakes. Accept the fact that it has some wonderful strengths. and then find a way to dance with it, find a way to work with it, and stop expecting it to be perfect and stop expecting it to do stuff instead of us.
Yeah, I like that. And that's also parallel to when we go back into the 60s or 70s, when the synthesizer came on the market, where you could do stuff that were very unheard. So a lot of people thought, okay, wow, this changes our business. We will not have any orchestras anymore because the synthesizer will be in our place. Now, interesting enough, there are much less orchestras in the world now, but it was not the problem of the synthesizer. So there were completely different problems. So let's see, is AI just another instrument that develops in a certain way that is very interesting? And at the moment, if we hear, let's say, modern released music, there's only electronical technology involved most of the time. And on the other hand, it's interesting to see how does the musicianship develop, and that's why I like very much your approach to help musicians to, doesn't matter in what way or in what genre they want to work. You just, let's say it's like let me say, like a teacher or a companion helping you to be the better you and making the steps to what you will become.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's like we're all searching for an analogy to what's coming here. And in a way, what's frustrating is that it's not exactly like anything that we've seen before. It's not exactly an instrument, right? It's not quite what it is. No. It's not the all-knowing oracle, so we're kind of getting frustrated and unsettled that it doesn't live up to that expectation as well, because it keeps failing us in different ways. It's not infallible. The way that I think about it is that it is a brain, kind of like an alien brain. It's definitely a brain. It's definitely an intelligent being, right? Not like us, different than us. And it's like an alien landed here, and it's very smart, but it's not smarter than us in every way. But we're not smarter than it in every way, and it's willing to work with us 24/7, and it's open to itself getting known by us. It's open to becoming known, and I think that's okay, right? And it's not infallible. It's not a god. It's just its own type of flawed but wonderful intelligence, right? And it's this kind of like openness to discovering what it really is, but not putting up a white flag and saying, okay, I don't have to think anymore. I have been replaced, right? I'm seeing a lot of that, and that's really dangerous for us as humans. But also not being like, oh, it's imperfect, so we need to throw it out. So it's just in between that collaboration space that I think is most precious here.
I like that. You talked about science fiction, where there's the dystopia, but do you know books by Annalee Newitz?
No, I haven't seen those.
I will put this in the show notes, because Annalee Newitz, as far as I know, she wrote 2 novels, and that's so interesting to read a novel and so fiction, because it's always a speculative fiction. How would it be in 2,000 years? In one of her books, she describes that every human is accompanied by, let's say, a computer, but you have to imagine this like a robot, for example. So someone who's accompanying you in whatever you do, because you're, let's say, are together. But then if you meet someone which has also some kind of let's call it robot for the lack of a better word. But what then happens is that they also have direct contact with each other, which is creepy, because you think, hey, what are they doing when we as humans want to interact? And that's an interesting thought. Is this good or bad? Because you're living together in that sense. It's like we all live together with our computers, and if we now use AI on the computer, then I would say, hey, that's not in the far distance. And another book of her, it's Terraformers. That's really plays much more in the future. there everything is completely merged. So it's not like a cyborg and it doesn't feel bad. It's like real humans, but they're also other objects. And what I like of it is when you read the novels of her, you first have to, let's say, you read, but you listen. You try to understand what's going on. What does she? What's her world that she's creating? And then you learn new words, but not crazy words like in a fighting science fiction movie. It's like, okay, oh, it's a different way. So how will we communicate in, let's say, in 500 years? How do we know if the soil that we are working on is good soil or bad soil? Yeah, nowadays we do an analysis and then we send it to the lab and then we get the results. But maybe in 500 years we just take our very hand, put it into the ground, and then we feel if it's good or bad, for example. So I like that speculative part very much. So that resonates a lot with what you just said.
This is fascinating. I love it when science fiction writers take us to new territory, and this whole like companion robots. That's super intriguing. Wow. One thought I wanted to share around it is that we tend to think of science fiction as attempting to predict the future, but I actually think it's ultimately prescriptive. I think ultimately investors and entrepreneurs get inspired by science fiction. And so the reason that we see a lot of it kind of come true, having had a chance to spend so many years in the venture ecosystem, is precisely because the imagination of science fiction influences the people who build the technology and the people who invest in the technology. So we really are like, imagination is so much more important than we give it credit to in our world. What we imagine, we become ultimately. And if we all imagine it enough, we even as we are afraid of the all-knowing Oracle AI, we all believe that that's where we're heading. Whereas we really don't have to be heading there. This is not something that we have to keep imagining collectively.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Let me think. That might also could link us to you wrote a book, or you're writing a book, and it will come out at the end of the year, you told me. And it's about creative machines. So are the machines creative, or are we creative machines, or is it machinistic creatives? Or tell us a little bit more about it.
Who is creative? Yeah, so Wiley reached out and asked me to write a book, and I ultimately agreed. And it's been a ride, kind of taking all the thoughts and ideas and experiences I had over the past 10 years and putting them down on paper. The book is called Creative Machines. It's available for pre-order now, and it's going to be available for sale and delivered to those who pre-order in October. So it's actually coming up pretty quickly. And the book is all about creative machines, starting with what is creativity at all? How do we understand that concept? Because you really have to spend a little bit of time breaking it down. Otherwise, we all are imagining something else about the word creativity. And then we dive into some of the earliest creative machines. And yes, in my opinion, the machines are creative, which I don't think is terrifying because they're creative in a somewhat different way than us, which opens up the way to what I find to be the most important part of the book in some sense, which are humble creative machines, which is the vision for how the machines can help profoundly elevate us. So that's the only topic on which I spent 2 chapters. So you kind of have the first part of the book, which talks about what is and what was, and you have the second part of the book, which talks about where I think things should go. And I think it's a really good book for creative people trying to understand what is happening here and how to navigate this weird but obviously critical moment in the development of creativity and creative industries.
Wow, sounds exciting.
Thank you.
And it has a lot to do, I imagine, with the WaveAI, with what you did there, and as a researcher, or how can we imagine this?
It synthesizes a lot of my experiences. It's the way that I understand my own life is that I've had the incredible fortune to be inside of this evolution as it was happening. I was in it for about 9 years before it became really popular. So I got to know the research communities, the researchers. I got to build one of the earliest startups. I got to understand how the business world, investors and entrepreneurs thought about creative machines or did not think about them before it was hot. And then I got to watch what happens very much from the inside as seemingly overnight, this stuff became incredibly popular. Kind of this new wave of AI came about. And I think consumers sometimes feel that it was them who made it happen. Mm-hmm. But it's a very interesting interplay between investors, between corporations. The ways that it actually played out is kind of a secret. And I talk about that in the book, kind of the details of what happened that made it blow up. So kind of a little bit of a recent history part that I think is really, really fascinating, and how powerful players play the game from the background, completely hidden from your views. And then we as consumers are just sort of struck by where everything is happening as if it's happening naturally and organically through some kind of evolution process, when it's not, when it's real people making decisions that are impacting how this thing is going. And in fact, what consumers, going to kind of give away kind of one part, what consumers want are tools to help them grow, to help them do their work better, while keeping themselves smart and on top of everything and not losing control. And even as products that do that are successful, the vision of powerful investors remain intact. So the new products that get investments are not necessarily following what has worked in the recent past. It's fascinating. But regardless of all the chaos, I share a lot about how people can navigate it and kind of a way of looking at it that can keep sort of you a functioning, more creative human being amidst all this chaos.
So it sounds like creative machines for creative people.
That's the best, isn't it? More creativity all around. I also...
It connects so much with what you said before.
Yeah, I mean, it's all these kind of ideas that I developed over the past 10 years. The one thing that I wanted to mention, and that extends beyond the book as well, but I talk about it in the book too, are hallucinations. And, hallucinations have a bad rap. The word sounds negative, whether you apply it to humans or machines, but really it's almost a synonym for imagination. It's when you're allowed to disconnect from the realities and constraints of whatever world you're operating in and allowed to go somewhere new. And I think that's really not only the birthplace of creative machines, were these spaces where there was no right and wrong, but also a way for creative machines to move forward, for us to allow for them to draw outside the lines, to stop wanting them to tell us the truth and rely into their creative capabilities so they can make us more creative.
I have a hypothesis that's the base of the power of music thinking, so that I say to people, the way you listen to music is also the way you listen to your partner, to your clients, to your customer, or to society. So and we only can hear what we know. So if we don't know something, and that's like the cocktail party effect. You're at a cocktail party and you hear all the noises. But if someone says Maya, then you hear this because you're trained on it. In my case, it's Christoph. So that's interesting. So we know, and that also works for all the other things. So and it's the same information that comes to our ear, but we only hear what we know. So the trick must be we have to know much more, and that's also the link with music. The music is, I think in Spotify, they tracked more than 6,200 different genre types. So there's a lot of variation, and it doesn't stop. It will evolve more and more. And I think that's an interesting thought. And I wonder if the fact that you are a musician that you took different decisions in, we talked about the ethics, we talked about using it as a tool, developing creative machines, and also making a business. Because let's face it, as musicians, at a certain time, we have to get paid. Otherwise, we can't play anymore, or we play on the streets.
Wow, that's so powerful. I love this. You can only hear what you know. That's so true. That sort of also connects to Cecil Neal's view around hallucinations, where essentially he says that we are prediction machines, meaning at every moment we're predicting what's going to happen, and occasionally we have to correct when reality strongly contradicts what we expect, which means that we're constantly predicting based on what we know, right? We constantly interpret based on what we know. So it's really cool how these two connect. I think you're so right. How did being a musician impact all the different stuff that I did? Probably a lot. That would be my best guess. I think maybe being a musician helps you get in touch with some of these more intuitive parts of life, right? And just feel your way through life a little more. Because in the end, when it comes to running a successful business or really doing anything in this world that's not just following someone else's instructions, having that sixth sense as developed as possible makes all the difference. So maybe that's connected to being a musician. What do you think?
Yeah, you learn leading and following. And it doesn't mean if you're, let's say, the most famous trumpet player in the world, and when you're on the stage that you play all the time. So it's only you take your moment and you do this. And at a certain moment, you also follow what's going on. And I think to be very, very human is to learn an instrument, also make faults, try to get better with it. And it doesn't matter if it's, let's say, a wind instrument or keys, or maybe even a DAW or AI as an instrument. And I think that makes us very human. It's a dialogue, and I think that musicians are very good in this. And that's also my something that I tell to people, if you don't know what kind of people you need in your company, why not hire musicians? Because they're natural collaborators. And if you really want to achieve something, you need people that can work together with you, sometimes in the lead and sometimes in the following. And following is not bad because, how could we ever hear a symphony if everyone would be in the lead?
Wow, I love that. That's such a powerful perspective. As I was running my company, that's when I relearned to play didn't exactly relearn, but I kind of got back into piano and learned how to improvise for the first time. And I discovered how much I love accompanying singers, actually. And sort of this dance of leading and following. You're right, it's life, and it's something we musicians explicitly are trained for.
Yeah, and if you play together with people a longer time, sometimes your moment, or let's say your momentum, to step up, and sometimes your time to step back and also let other people shine. Hey, talking about improvisation, let's make a link back to your book. How much improvisation is in creative machines?
Oh. One of my favorite experiences was with a system called Improvisor, Impro-Visor, a system by the late Robert Keller. And I struggled with improvising most of my life. And I remember going to the International Conference on Computational Creativity, and Robert Keller had his system out. And I would play a little bit, and it would trade with me. We would play about 4 to 8 bars each. And I could not believe it. After a few minutes of playing with this thing, I felt like I could improvise. Mm-hmm. It was incredible. It's just really an intentionally improvisational system. So that's, I think, the most glaring, obvious, epic examples of machine improvisation I've dealt with. But I think that's improvisation and the ability to explore the creative space of possibilities is at the heart of creative machines. That is their purpose. That's what they do. So my system, Lyric Studio, Melody Studio, whether it's melodies or chord progressions or lyrics, It's all about going out there and improvising a new line for you. And you get to decide if that works for you or not. That's the core. That's where they're strong. That's where they have an advantage over us, because they so shamelessly can explore the space of creative possibilities without being, something about the way our brains work tends to get us a little stuck in repeating the same ideas, whereas machines don't have this limitation. So integrating that capabilities with our ability is just pure magic.
Maya, I think we touched a lot. There are many links. Is there anything that you think you would like to share and that we didn't touch?
No, this was fantastic. Wow, Christoph, thank you so much for having me.
Then I would say let's call it a day. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate this, because listening is one of the top leadership skills, and I feel honored about this. It is my mission to find, create, and share inspirations for meaningful collaboration based on music analogies. If you want to support this, please subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, or write a review on iTunes or Spotify. And more inspirations can be found on musicthinking.com. We have a blog, and you can download the Music Thinking Framework. And finally, I would love to hear your feedback. And if you need help with a business challenge, please reach out to me via email, podcast@musicthinking.com.